Hey guys, welcome to my channel. I hope you're all doing very well. Now this weekend seems to be the weekend of villains. With the release of Cruella and Lucifer season 5 part 2, villains seem to be having a moment right now. Villains seem to be having a moment. We seem to be rooting for the bad guy, especially in 2021. I mean, if you take a look at WandaVision with Agatha and also Wanda herself, and in Falcon and the Winter Soldier, we had Zemo. Zemo of all people emerging as one of the best parts of that entire series. And of course, sticking to the Marvel theming, we do have the upcoming Loki series just right around the corner. Today we are going to be celebrating specifically the release of Cruella, and in order to do so, I thought it'd be a fun idea to go through the best Disney villains. Now, the villains that we're going to be talking about today are the villains from the Disney animated classics specifically, because otherwise there's too many. Because otherwise, already there's too many. But otherwise, if we're going for all Disney villains of all time, like, we're going to be here forever. Okay, we're going to miss the Loki premiere. We can't do that. So instead, we're going to be focusing on the animated classics. Now, I already did a breakdown, a full extravaganza of my favorite Disney animated classics overall. And you can check out that video if you haven't already. It's yet another one of those Jean does whatever the hell she wants videos. Jean does whatever the hell she wants. She talks about whatever the hell she wants on her channel. And that actually comes under the kind of movie chats playlist. So if you want to check out more videos like that, then you can do so in that playlist. But not all of the villains that are going to be mentioned today have made an appearance in that video. Some of them have, because those films are just that excellent. But in the case of some of these villains, whilst the overall films that they appear in aren't remarkable in my opinion, I do think that they deserve a spot on this particular list. So you can go ahead and keep on watching if you want to find out what my list is of the best Disney villains of all time. But before we get into it, of course, if you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe to my channel and make sure you turn on your notifications so that you can be told when I upload next. I like to upload me some random videos like this. So if that sounds like a good time to you, then you can go ahead and subscribe and make sure you give this video a like, because that really helps the channel out. But without further ado, let's get into my list of the best Disney villains. So just know going in that this list is not going to be in any particular order. Okay, I'm not listing it from best to worst. These are just some great Disney villains that I thought I would mention in this video. We're just having a fun time with it, okay? We're keeping it casual and hopefully we're keeping it short and sweet. But I know I talk a lot, so I'm so sorry if this video is over half an hour long. There's no reason there's no reason for that to be the case. I'm so sorry in advance. Let's get started, okay? First off, right off the bat, let's just get this one out of the way, because I've spoken about him several times this year already, so we need to move on quickly. But the first Disney villain up is Dr. Facilier from The Princess and the Frog. As I said, I've mentioned The Princess and the Frog on this channel several times this year, so we're not going to stick with this character for too long because I have thoughts, okay, that I've already talked about in other videos. But in the case of Dr. Facilier, he follows the tradition of a lot of Disney villains in that his name describes what his role is in the film. For those of you who aren't French speakers, Facilier is to basically make something easy. It basically means to, facilitate, kind of, but basically to just give you the easy way out. He's essentially the kind of middleman to making a deal with the devil, or as he calls it, his friends on the other side. And I really enjoy this character. I enjoy his charisma. I enjoy his whole persona. But what's always struck me about this character is that you have this added element of he's also somewhat of a victim, because he has friends on the other side, but they're not really his friends. He offers you chances of a lifetime, opportunities, your dreams coming true. In the case of Prince Naveen, he wants to live a wealthy, privileged lifestyle without being bogged down by marriage because his parents cut him off. In the case of his butler, he wants to be Prince Naveen, but also wealthy. And in the case of Princess Tiana, she had given in. Dr. Facilier was offering her her restaurant of her dreams, the restaurant that she's been dreaming of bringing about, saving every single cent, every single penny, working so hard to bring about. He was offering that to her within a blink of an eye. All she had to do was give him the talisman. I do really enjoy that aspect of the character, the fact that he makes these promises with these small significant prices that are to be paid on the other end. And if I'm considering one of the categories, one of the arbitrary categories for this whole list, it has to be, you know, the plan, it would have to be the motivation. I think in the case of Dr. Facilier, his motivation is quite strong. Why? Because he seems to be indebted to his friends on the other side. They're not his friends. They're not the friendship that is shared there. No, he's misunderstood. They seem to be his bosses. They seem to be these entities, these demons that have lent him powers that he can use in order to grant people these mutated versions of their wishes and their desires temporarily. But in the meantime, he gets their souls. He looks in on their souls and he gets them for his friends on the other side. Now, another category that I had to consider when it came to these Disney villains is their musical numbers. Absolutely. We're talking the aesthetics, we're talking about the song themselves, and in the case of Dr. Facilier, Friends on the Other Side is a tune. Friends on the Other Side is a tune. That whole scene, that whole sequence that takes place is magnifique. Très bon. Okay, because first of all, the animation, the way that the animation changes, it becomes technicolor, the neon colors, all of these different demons popping up, these voodoo dolls. It is so creative, it is so beautiful, it is so distinct from everything else. It is an excellent sequence visually, but then the song itself, Are You Ready? The way that there's this build up with the drums, like Are You Ready? Drawing you in. Wow. Wow, I was like, yes, I'm ready. Yes, I'm ready to make a deal with the devil. It was excellent. It was brilliant. So Dr. Facilier ranks really highly when it comes to the villain songs as well. All right, we need to move on. I've already talked about this character and indeed this film several times this year already, so you guys must be sick of hearing it. We'll move on to a character that I haven't mentioned on this channel, but his name is Claude Frollo from The Hunchback of Notre Dame. Now, listen. This villain is on another level. I think the reason is because he feels so real. A lot of these villains seem like they're so fantastical, they're so magical. You can't really imagine them existing in a real world. But when it comes to Claude Frollo, and indeed a lot of The Hunchback of Notre Dame, especially in the subtext, it is very much planted in reality, and that's what makes Frollo so scary and so sinister. So essentially, if you haven't seen The Hunchback of Notre Dame, watch it, correct that immediately. But Claude Frollo is this pious, righteous man, and a lot of the film he's talking about how pious and righteous he is, and he is at war with the gypsy traveler people who live in Paris, and they are being hunted down by this man who deems them to be, you know, unfit for his version of society, his ideal version of society, and he's basically marginalized them, as they are marginalized just in general, but he has a specific vendetta against them, and specifically he has zeroed in on one of the traveler women, who's called Esmeralda, and he seems to be infatuated by her. He seems to be obsessed with her. He's not in love with her. I'm not giving him that credit, okay? He is not in love with her. He has basically fetishized her, and likely it's because of this kind of fetishization of the other. I mean, she's a gypsy woman and she's portrayed as, you know, very sensual and over-sexualized, and so in his eyes she's been over-sexualized and she's been depicted as this kind of sensual, tempting, you know, woman who's from a different race and a different class, and he's tempted by her. And essentially it's very much an exercise in fetishizing women from, you know, different backgrounds. Basically, we see this trope with the Latina women, we see this trope with black women as well, and in the case of Hunchback of Notre Dame, we see it with traveler women, and especially in the case of Esmeralda. So that's the kind of twisted angle of this character. Already you're looking at him like, oh, you're giving him the side eye, like that is dodge as hell, that is sus as hell. But then you have the added element of the way that he treats Quasimodo. First of all, as the opening song, The Bells of Notre Dame, explains, Quasimodo means half-formed. That's the name that Frollo gave him. Like this poor poor orphan kid who landed on his doorstep, and he initially was going to kill him. Let's not forget that he was going to commit murder, but it was that guy, the friar, I think he was, who warned him, like, listen, the eyes of Notre Dame are watching, best not do that now. And so he ends up taking him in, putting him in the bell tower and calling him Quasimodo, half-formed, rude, ableism, rude. Anyway, so the fact that he's ableist, the fact that he treats Quasimodo like that, the fact that he, fetishizes this traveler woman, as well as, chasing after her like she's his prey. This character's disgusting. This character is disgusting, but like I said, he feels like he's rooted in reality a lot more than a lot of the other villains in these Disney films. And that's what's so interesting about him. He's not that far removed from real life, unfortunately, especially considering he's a man in a position of power in this, I believe, 19th century society in Paris. He's seen as someone who is righteous and pious and, has a good moral code, and that seems to be far from the case when you look at what he's actually doing in this film. And so yeah, that's what makes him such a fascinating villain. Even though The Hunchback of Notre Dame is an interesting film, it kind of competes with the different tones of wanting to be a kid's film whilst at the same time exploring these very adult themes, and that's what kind of knocks it down on my list of best Disney film. But it is still very interesting, and I think a lot of that comes from the character of Claude Frollo. Now, if we're talking about Disney songs, we can't go a minute further without mentioning Hellfire. We can't go a minute further without mentioning what? That whole sequence is magnifique. It basically divulges everything I just said, especially when it comes to his infatuation and obsession with Esmeralda. The fact that he wants to own her, the fact that he would rather kill her than have anyone else look at her. Like, oh, he's a disgusting character, but that song is incredible. The whole soundtrack is incredible. Alan Menken put that special crack in the Hunchback of Notre Dame soundtrack. Just incredible. Now, we can't go a minute further into this list without mentioning the Queen herself, the star of this weekend. That is, of course, Miss Cruella de Vil herself. Now, when it comes to 101 Dalmatians as a film overall, like, it's good. Like, it's a good classic Disney animated film. I wouldn't say it's one of my favorites. I actually grew up watching the live action version on VHS before I ever even saw the animated version. So for the longest time, I didn't even realize there was an animated version. But I love the live action version, especially Glenn Close's Cruella. Please. She was amazing in that role. And I think Emma Stone, spoiler alert for my review of the latest film, also did a great job. But of course, we need to go to the origin. Of course, we need to go to the original Cruella herself. And she is just like crazy. Like, she's out here like skinning dogs, or she wants to skin dogs. Like, that's in terms of craziness level, like, if we're gonna add that as a category to be considered for this video, I think Cruella's like up there. In terms of her motives, I do think they're relatively weak. I can't remember what her motives are for wanting to skin dogs alive. I wonder if the live action version of this character, especially if there's a possible sequel that comes along, will kind of manufacture something else, because right now we're kind of lost when it comes to the motives of Cruella. It seems as though nothing can justify going around skinning dogs. What this character lacks when it comes to writing and motives and all of that, she makes up for in iconography. She makes up for in literally being so iconic. So incredibly iconic. First of all, the name. I remember the day when I realized that Cruella de Vil basically meant cruel devil, and I felt like I was a genius. I felt like the black and white look with the red lipstick, iconic. Please. Her driving is also iconic. Her driving down the streets of London with that hunched back and her scowl with Horace and Jasper in the back. That's also an iconic sequence that Emma was able to recreate very, very well in the new live action film. But overall, Cruella is just a really iconic character, and I think that's why she deserves a slot here. I can't remember a lot about her character in terms of how she was written in the original films, but let's be real, everyone knows who Cruella Cruella de Vil is, and that is for a reason. And of course, we have to mention the song. Like Cruella de Vil, the song is a great song. I've been singing it in my head all weekend ever since I went to see the film in cinemas. So yeah, like absolutely, she deserves the points and she deserves to be on this list for that. Now the next villain I would say is actually pretty close to Cruella. She's more of an honorable mention if I'm being honest. She's not quite as iconic as some of these other villains in this list, and that is Yzma from The Emperor's New Groove. Yzma, again, very wacky character. Again, you have this very thin, emaciated, you know, older woman who is a villain in a film. And I'm more familiar with the character of Yzma from the Emperor's New Groove TV series as opposed to the original film. Again, I grew up watching the series before I even saw the original film, and I grew up watching the sequel before I saw the original film. I think the sequel is Kronk's New Groove, which is really cute. I did want to give her a shout out because I feel like the Emperor's New Groove overall gets very overlooked, and I do think she's a pretty iconic character. She's just so hideous. She's just so hideous. I think she's in the same vein as Cruella de Vil in that front, where the aesthetic of the character is really iconic. And speaking of Kronk, this is a category that I haven't really touched on yet, but we're introducing it here. I do think that sidekicks are very important when it comes to these Disney villains, and I think Kronk is a pretty cool sidekick, especially from what I saw of him in the series and of course in Kronk's New Groove, I think the sequel is called. He's a really fun, cute character. He's kind of like a reformed sidekick at that point though, because they don't really commit to him being a bad guy in the way that Yzma is. Now Yzma might be the first villain on this list with a notable sidekick, but she's certainly not the last, because the next villain that I'm going to be mentioning, his sidekick is truly iconic. He might actually have the best villain sidekick of all of the Disney classics actually, even though he eventually does become good. But the next one up is Jafar from Aladdin. Like I said, I think Iago is iconic. I do believe Iago as a character was named after the character in Othello, so there's like Shakespearean roots there. But I do think that Iago, voiced by Gilbert Gottfried, I mean, it's it's iconic. Like I said, okay, his voice is just incredible. But now let's talk about Jafar himself. We need to give him some credit as well, because Jafar is a political tactician. Jafar is a political villain who's looking to usurp the Sultan, and quite frankly, I don't know why it took him this long. Quite frankly, if it wasn't for the involvement of Aladdin, like, I think Jafar could have usurped the Sultan quite easily. The Sultan isn't the sharpest tool in the box. I don't think he needed the genie in order to take over Agrabah. Like, he literally could have done it in his sleep. So I don't know why Jafar went to all of those lengths, quite frankly, but he did. He had a plan, okay, and it was a very elaborate plan. When it comes to the plans that these Disney villains have, I think he's very much up there. Like I said, he's a political tactician, okay, he's a very clever villain. And on top of this, he also has the magical element. He is a master of the mystic arts, and he uses that to his advantage by basically getting the Sultan to do whatever he wants. Again, I don't know why he needed the genie. Like, he didn't really need the genie. But he needed the genie for some reason, and so he followed the law and he was able to get the diamond in the rough in the cave and all of that. And yeah, he would have had it too if it wasn't for the meddling kids. Like, the only element of Jafar that I found quite sus, that I really didn't like in the original animated version of Aladdin, was that weird twist where he wants to pursue Jasmine and make her his queen. That was weird. We could have done without that. It could have been left in the cutting room floor. But otherwise, I do think Jafar is a very strong candidate for best Disney villain, because he has the plan, he has the sidekick, he doesn't have the song. So we knock a few points for the song because he doesn't really have an iconic song, but he is a pretty iconic villain. So next up we have a duo. I'm kind of lumping these two villains together because I feel the same way about both of them. But we have the evil queen from Snow White and Maleficent from Sleeping Beauty. Now when it comes to the evil queen, in the original film, like, yeah, she was like an archetypical evil stepmother character. I didn't really remember her being remarkable in any way. And I do feel like it's because Snow White, of course, was the first. And so, you know, we've seen this version of a villain be imitated time and time again. And so by the time we get to my generation, it feels very much, you know, done and something that we've seen lots of times beforehand because it's been imitated. So yeah, that's a tough one. I'm sure at the time she was iconic, she was incredible, like wow, blowing my mind. But nowadays, and I can only view this as a viewer that's speaking nowadays, she's kind of bog standard as a villain. So like, you know, she's there, okay, she's powerful, she's evil, like she did all of that just to be the fairest of them all. Like, is it really that deep? Is it really that deep? You could tell she was written by a man. Is it really that deep? I will say though, before moving on to Maleficent, if there is one version of the evil queen that I can absolutely get down with, it's the one from Once Upon a Time. Once Upon a Time gave us many live action versions of a few of these Disney villains that we're talking about today, but the one that they irrefutably did the best was the evil queen. Absolutely, hands down, Regina as the evil queen. Mwah. Now the second one, in the case of Maleficent, I do once again feel like the live action version of the character is superior. I like the way that Angelina Jolie portrayed this character. I think she really revitalized her and brought a lot more personality and made her a three-dimensional character, which I appreciated. But again, in terms of the original animated version, you know, she's an evil queen again, like basically she's another evil queen. So yeah, and she's also very cruel. Having said that though, once again, the aesthetic, okay, I do think Maleficent's look is even more iconic than that of the evil queen from a Snow White. So props to her. Okay, the horns ended up being very iconic. Such a look. So happy for her because she looks really cool. But other than that, like, what can you tell me about the evil? She turns into a dragon at the end. That's cool. Next, speaking of horns, can we talk about the Horned King from the Black Cauldron for a second? I'm not going to stick on this for too long because I've only ever seen the Black Cauldron once, and it's known as being one of like Disney's duds from like their dark ages before the Renaissance period came in the 1980s and 90s. So we already know what the Dark Cauldron is, no offense. But I did still want to give a shout out to the Horned King for honestly being the scariest of the Disney villains in terms of the way he's animated. He's like legitimately terrifying. He's like legitimately terrifying. In terms of everything else, like his personality, motives, his plan. I mean, his plan is to create an army of the dead using the Black Cauldron, I think. So his plan is actually pretty cool. But in terms of everything else, like you could put a gun to my head. I don't know what goes on in that film. I don't know what goes on in that film, okay? But his look, the way that he's animated, he is the scariest looking Disney villain for sure. Next up, we have an underrated villain from an underrated film. I'm talking about Hades. I'm talking about Hades from Hercules. Listen, I've already spoken about how criminally underrated Hercules is as a film in my Disney animated classics list, so you can go ahead and check that out to hear my thoughts. But that film is criminally underrated. I must emphasize, criminally underrated. We all deserve to be in handcuffs, absolutely. When it comes to Hades as a character, he is like so iconic. Like he's, oh my goodness. First of all, vocal performance, incredible. I think the actor did a great job. I can't remember his name, but he did a great job in his vocal performance as Hades. He has the gravitas that is necessary for this kind of character, the god of death itself. But at the same time, he has that zaniness, he has that edginess that roots him firmly within 1990s culture. Just excellent, excellent character. The way that he interacts with Meg, like he's one of her friends at one point, but then he reminds her like, no, we're not friends, I'm not your friend from the other side. Like Dr. Facilier, okay, he's very much her boss, okay, he's very much her manager, kind of like those managers who try to be your friends, but it's like, whoa, there's a certain line there, you can't get fully comfortable. That's what Hades is giving me. I think he's just such an excellent character, and in terms of his plan, bringing the Titans back, absolutely excellent. He's been planning because he's been waiting for the planets to be aligned, so he knows what he's doing. He sees far into the future. And then you have the way that he used Hercules' weaknesses. He was paying attention. He was paying attention. He was trying to find a way to get to Hercules' Achilles heel. And he realized by paying attention that Hercules' Achilles heel ended up being Meg. Ended up being the bait that he put in front of him. And he used that, and in the end, Hercules literally had to leap into the river Sphinx, I believe it's called. The river of death, in order to save Meg. And also the way that he's animated is very clever. He has this flame hair that it's blue and cool when he's calm and composed, but then when he gets angry it becomes like red and on fire, even though technically blue flame is hotter than a red flame, but still is kind of reflecting his comportment and his disposition at that time. I just think it's such a clever design for the character. He's also quite terrifying, and as I mentioned in my previous video, Hercules was the film that really got me interested in Greco-Roman mythology from like day one. And so I would absolutely love to see a live action version of this character done justice, because I think the animated version is truly superb. And if we're gonna mention sidekicks, I do think that Pain and Panic are some pretty notable sidekicks in their own right. Next up we have a big one, and I'm not just talking about her size, I'm talking about the iconicness. I'm talking about the level of iconicness in this character, and of course I must be talking about Ursula from The Little Mermaid. Please. Everyone else go home. Everyone else go home. I'm so sorry. Like, all of the villains in this list are great, very notable, blah blah blah. Ursula is queen. Ursula, she's yet another villain where, you know, you're making a deal with the devil. Okay, we've seen this before. Like I said, Dr. Facilier, we've seen it with other villains. But this time around, she came legally prepared. She came with a contract. Oh wow, she came with a contract. I think this was my first introduction to the concept of a contract. The fact that Ursula presented Ariel with a contract saying this is what you need to sign in order to get what you want from me. I just, what? And then you have the added fact that she literally stole Ariel's voice from her. I have so many issues when it comes to the character of Ariel. I think she's dumb. I think she's naive. And yes, she's really young, but the thing is, the film doesn't really embrace the fact that she's young, dumb, and naive. It kind of goes with the idea that she was right all along, which I disagree with. You can't be giving away your voice for a man you don't know. Like, that's crazy. But Ursula took advantage. She was like, okay, well, I'm gonna take your voice from you. The thing that makes you you, the thing that makes you stand out from everyone, including your own sisters. Like, we had a whole song about this. I'm gonna take your voice away from you, and I'm gonna use you as leverage against the king, King Triton, so that I can become the Queen of Atlantis. Genius. Now, in terms of her sidekicks, she has those eels. They're one of the weakest parts of the character, quite frankly. Like, we don't really care about the sidekicks. What it's all about is the song. Poor Unfortunate Souls, one of the best Disney villain songs, hands down. Poor Unfortunate Souls has the crack, has the special sauce in it, because that song is truly incredible. Are you kidding me? I'm saying it in my head as I speak. Poor Unfortunate Souls is a moment. And also when it comes to the aesthetic of the character overall, that very much plays into the way that the character is written, and indeed her song. I believe the character was inspired by the drag queens of the day, hence her exaggerated makeup, and we do actually see her applying makeup in the film. Aesthetically, she is so distinct. I mean, she is this sea witch, and she's also this like octopus who has this voluptuous plus size body on the top, and then she kind of sprawls out into these tentacles as this kind of human octopus hybrid. So the iconography is so effective. The character is so memorable. I really do think she is one of the greatest in this list. And finally, we need to talk about the big one. We need to talk about the obvious one. Like, you thought I was gonna make this list and not include this character. Please not for a second did you think that. Of course I am talking about Scar from The Lion King. I mean, you want to talk about iconic vocal performance, Jeremy Irons giving everything that the role needed, the role deserved, brilliant. The way that the character is animated, listen, it doesn't make sense. He has green eyes. It doesn't make sense. Biologically speaking, but he looks iconic. He looks so distinct from all of the other lions from Pride Rock. He doesn't look like Mufasa's brother, and that's the point. He's supposed to be scrawny. He's the one that lost. And yes, you know, when it comes to zoology, he wouldn't actually be there in real life, blah blah blah. But it's a Disney film, it doesn't matter. The point is that he looks so different just biologically from his brother that you can already tell he's the bad guy. Like, it's telegraphed to us from the minute that we see him. But then on top of that, you have the plan. Let's talk about the plan. Let's talk about how his plan is basically the first introduction into the concept of death and the death of a parent that a lot of kids who watch this film experience. His plan is traumatic for kids everywhere in a way that a lot of these other villains' plans aren't. Like, none of these other villains' plans impact real children in the way that Scar's plan does. He kills Mufasa. He kills Mufasa in one of the most emotional moments in all of cinematic history. There really is no other. There really is no other when it comes to his plan, and the fact that he was able to carry it out. Like, he won for a good moment. Let's not forget this. But then you also have his sidekicks, the hyenas, which ended up being his downfall as well. I just think the poetic justice there is mwah. But then you have, of course, speaking of the hyenas and his pact with them, the iconic song, the iconic musical sequence that Scar has for Be Prepared. Please, we're talking Nazi iconography. We're talking the green color grading to match his eyes. We're talking the song itself and Jeremy Irons singing it. Singing. Okay, he's not the strongest vocal performance in terms of singing, okay? But the song, the sequence, it's just, everything just comes together when it comes to Scar as a character, much like the Lion King overall, let's be real. And so in that sense, he hits every single category. He is truly the king of the Disney villains. But that's it from me. Now that I told you guys my thoughts on the best Disney villains, it's time for you guys to let me know what your favorites are down in the comments below. Who do you think reigns supreme? Do you agree that it's Scar? Let me know. Please be sure to subscribe to catch new videos coming up. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.